So, Dumo, thank you so much for making time to share your
Thank you.
insights into the future of leadership.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. And thanks for having me on this very important platform.
Thank you, Dumo. It's great to have you on the show. And before we walk into the future, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Where did you grow up?
Yes, Dr. Nick, I grew up in Mbethe in the Eastern Cape. And, it was formative years in an environment that was characterized by themes of faith, education, music. I mean, choral music was big in Mbethe. Sports, we played pretty much every sport you can think of: badminton, tennis, volleyball, you name it. Ultimately, cricket was the one I stuck with for the longer term. And then, politics. I mean, politics was a very big part of the environment that I grew up in, given that we were a homeland in the South African context. But I think what stands out for me the most about growing up in Mbethe was just how everyone really strived for excellence. They're quite I look at even people I went to school with, who have gone on to become quite successful, in their careers, whether they chose to go the entrepreneurial route or the professional route. And one of those elements, Dr. Nick, that I remember quite clearly is graduation season. Graduation season in March, April in Mbethe was one of the most popular seasons. And you would see, graduates wearing their regalia, even getting onto public transport, attending functions to celebrate, academic excellence. And that is something that really, really stood out and just inspired this, focus on education, as being a ticket to opening doors in life.
Thank you, Dumo. And can you tell us what was your dream career when you grew up?
Oh, yes. I went through quite a few different paths and options. I think in childhood, being a police officer was right up there. At some point, I had a doctor set that I got as a birthday gift, and being a doctor became the thing. And then also, being a soldier, as a few of my uncles were in the army at that time. But I think what really, stood out for me in terms of those careers was how they felt purposeful. And it was, careers that made a real impact on people's lives. Later on in life, I would then, come across accounting, and I took the accounting route, having learned that actually, as much as I enjoyed the subject, it could actually become a career. When a partner from from KPMG presented at one of our career evenings at school, and I went on to do my articles, with PwC. And at university, it was the technology bug that bit me, and just how technology is able to transform businesses to solve complex problems. So while my childhood dreams, Dr. Nick, were about serving and protecting people, I think my journey, led me to a space where I could blend that sense of purpose with some analytical and technological skills. And the dream has been evolving, and it's shaped by curiosity and that desire to make a difference through leadership in the world of business.
Thank you. And Dumo, can you tell us who inspired you?
Without a doubt, my parents. They're living, breathing, personifications of what excellence is and what, striving for the stars translates to. I think of my mother, she's a retired teacher. And at some point in her career, towards the end, at least towards the last part of her career, she actually pivoted to teaching at a school for the deaf, EFATA in Mbethe. And she was still applying her teaching skills, but she had to learn some new skills in terms of sign language and being able, firstly, to learn from the kids she was teaching, but also then to effectively impart knowledge to them. So that was quite, it taught me a lot about agility and, the fact that one can actually transform their careers as part of, striving for excellence. And then my father, who was in the National Treasury space until he retired, I just looked at the way he worked with his teams. He really treated his teams with respect, and was very much about the success of his teams. Created the space for them, gave them the opportunities. I remember even like when there were overseas conferences, he'd actually share the tickets with his teams and say, no, actually, I will not go for this one. Person X can go. And I think those lessons learned from them, and also quite critically, the importance of hard work, the importance of resilience, and what I have to thank them for, which is, the gift of education and a sound set of values to live by.
Now, Dumo, today you are the chief executive of Momentum Corporate. You're operating in a very competitive industry. What is motivating you? What is energizing you? And what is driving you every single day?
I must say, the one thing that drives me is how we can deepen and broaden financial inclusion. There are so many who are left outside of the net as we sit here today. And I do believe employee benefits have a critical role in achieving that objective. Once people have that gift of employment, I'm keen for us to then say, how do we then get more and more people into the employee benefits net? And that is something that drives me, every day. And then secondly, it's getting things done. There's nothing I enjoy more, Dr. Nick, than someone coming to me and saying, Dumo, you cannot, or this cannot be done. Proving that, even where there are doubts and barriers, that those can actually be overcome, and we can turn those into opportunities and really make progress possible. So for me, it's a combination of purpose, which is very aligned to our group's purpose of building and protecting our clients' financial dreams, but also perseverance. And that's what keeps me moving forward.
Thank you. Now, Dumo, walking into the future, looking into the future, and I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
Yeah, Dr. Nick, the future of leadership is fundamentally about adaptability. It's about empathy, and it's also about vision. And, you can imagine in this very complex and fast-changing world, there's a lot that leaders have to contend with. And it does require one to be able to move beyond your traditional command and control models to being a lot more inclusive and a lot more purpose-driven, but also just being agile. And I think with that in mind, it's about the ability to learn continuously and to collaborate, and really to be authentic as we do that. So it's really a balance of listening, leading, learning, and doing. And that's really what the future of leadership truly looks like.
And Dumo, what have you learned from your own leadership journey that you consider most important for building and developing future leaders?
Yeah, look, I must say earlier on in my career, it's something I might have appreciated less, because you are just kind of focused on passing the next board exam and, getting the next promotion. But in the fullness of time, I've grown to appreciate that it is really not just about building successful businesses. It's about leaving that positive, lasting impact, and always being willing to learn, and to adapt. And for me, the most important, being able to serve along the way. So I have been freed up, and I have gained so much from being able to direct the energy towards the success of my teams, and making sure that each person in the team is able to fulfill their career goals and aspirations. And actually then, that becomes like a flywheel that creates even bigger successes over time. And I've also learned that it's about, being authentic, and being true to yourself. And those elements are so critical, to creating a culture where diverse perspectives, are heard and they're actually valued.
Thank you. Now, Dumo, these are challenging times as the world is sliding from one crisis into the next. What is your advice for future leaders in terms of career challenges? What are some of the biggest career challenges future leaders should expect to encounter and hopefully overcome in their career?
So, Dr. Nick, I think one of the biggest challenges future leaders are going to face is managing constant change. I know it's a bit of a cliche, change is the only constant, but that's a reality. And things are changing even more rapidly than what we would have seen, historically. So keeping up and staying relevant, is quite key. So that ability to learn, but also the ability to unlearn, becomes quite important. I think another challenge will be balancing this pressure for short-term results with the need to build longer-term and sustainable value, and while just maintaining that genuine connection with their teams and stakeholders. So it does require, that those leaders will need to connect deeply and source ideas actually across the entire employee population, and listening to all critical stakeholders in order to navigate, some of those challenges, but also keeping an eye on the longer term goal. One reflection I have had over time is how difficult it can be to continuously improve, and as a leader. And that often requires patience. It also requires persistence, and just creating that culture where learning, and openness are things that are the daily way of doing things. So adaptability, without a doubt, is going to be key. But just accept things will change. I think when I started my career, Excel, PowerPoint, and those were views as productivity tools. Today, productivity tools are, ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini. The game has shifted, and we need to be able to shift with it as well.
Now, talking about the game shifting and tools, Dumo, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are some of the key skills that you would want to factor in and maybe teach?
First on the syllabus would be emotional intelligence. Know thyself. And as my high school, the motto was ad te ipsum fidelis esto at Mbethe International School, which is, to thine own self be true. So to truly understand yourself is actually a superpower. And you also get to understand yourself even more by getting 360 feedback. I would make 360 feedback and regular 360 feedback a very important part of that curriculum. Be able to look at yourself through the multiple windows of Johari's window. Being able to listen carefully and communicate. So communication skills would also be right up there. Flexibility, how we teach flexibility is a different story, and I've learned that, yes, 20% we will learn through, the academic and the classroom, but there's an 80% that is hands-on. So the more we can get practical, and the more one can give themselves practical challenges to tackle in the office environment in partnership with a coach and a mentor, is absolutely critical to that growth. And then I think the most important skill, the ability to get things done. I think many people can come up with ideas, many people can come up with good plans, but it's a special few that are able to drive execution and getting things done. And it's even more complex when you're leading, large organizations. Because now it's not just about you and what you can show up with. It's about how you inspire others to strive and to deliver on the bigger picture and being able to carry that bigger picture through, for everyone.
Absolutely. Now, Dumo, as a mentor to many future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
I must say I've gained so much from mentorship myself, from people who have mentored me over the years. One story that really stands out, Dr. Nick, is actually, one that illustrates the power of quiet mentorship. That mentor moments sometimes that don't feel like mentorship are the ones that make a real impact. And recently, we had a graduation ceremony for one of our leadership programs at work, and someone walked up, onto the stage, and I was there, shaking everyone's hands, handing out certificates. And when they came to shake my hand, I whispered to them, can you please next time firm up your handshake? And it's been 2, 3 years down the line now, and I bumped into them recently. And they said to me, do you realize the difference you made in that moment? Because for them, it was a lesson about, how they need to show up strong, show up with purpose, show up with conviction. And that's something that they've carried with them for all these years until now. So mentorship is, it does not always happen consciously. Sometimes it actually happens even while you are not consciously going about it. So that value of quiet mentorship is important. I've also had the privilege of mentoring someone who went on to become, a CFO in the financial services space. And I must say, through that journey, I've seen, that the person really embrace the learnings. Because some of the conversations in mentorship are tough. You need to be able to celebrate, what is strong, what is great, what the strengths are, but also to be able to have the difficult conversations and to be able to call out when things are not going quite the way they're supposed to be going. And it's a journey that we've walked together. And I think as much as I hope that he has learned a lot from the journey, I believe I've learned a lot from him as well. And it actually ends up becoming a two-way street. And a two-way street that's important, that's fueled actually by asking the right questions, of each other. And it's really meaningful and it's quite rewarding.
So it's true what they say, we are growing together.
Oh, yes. Yep. Yeah. It doesn't happen, in isolation at all.
Right. Now, Dumo, looking back over your own leadership journey, are there any role models of leadership who you have encountered and maybe worked with who you would like to recommend for future leaders to learn from?
Yes, Dr. Nick, when you talk about role models and, and heroes, let's pick a term. I think there's such a diversity of leaders we can look to. Personally, Nelson Mandela, does really embody that. And I think my pursuit for, really broadening and deepening financial inclusion in a way is borrowed, from his pursuit. You certainly cannot compare the two. And I think of some of the other names, from his generation and cohort of leaders, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Albertina Sisulu, Joe Slovo, people who taught us about resilience, forgiveness, and leading with a strong moral compass, even in the toughest circumstances. Then when we take it to the corporate world, Satya Nadella of Microsoft, who took a business that, yes, was successful, but transformed it by fostering a culture of learning and collaboration. I recently read his book, Hit Refresh, a very good read if you want to know about leading change and business transformation. And then there's locally Mbethe Nyati, currently the chairman of ESCOM, who wrote a book, Betting on a Darkie. It's a book I've read, and the way he, in such great detail outlines the various phases of his career, the lessons that he learned. I really found that powerful. And that phrase, just keep going. Because ultimately, it's about those who are brave enough to start the journey and to persist and continue with the journey, ultimately, who are able to get to the finish line and succeed. And then I also think, whilst we can look at the big names and those who are famous and in the public eye, we also, let's look closer to home, our colleagues, our managers, and our families. I think without being biased, Dr. Nick, I can safely say, my parents are right up there in that league of inspirational leaders.
Great. Thank you. And now, Dumo, where can our listeners follow you and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so I do try and post as much as possible on the LinkedIn platform, so they can follow me on LinkedIn, and then on the Momentum Corporate LinkedIn page as well, and the Momentum Group LinkedIn page, where I do quite often share thoughts and views, especially about our industry and also just broadly about leadership.
And last but not least, Dumo, what is your message to the millions of learners out there who are looking to finish school, start a career? What are maybe one or two key success principles that they should keep in mind?
Yeah, so if there's anything that I would say your listeners can take away, it's lead with empathy and just stay open to learning, and appreciate that leadership isn't about you. It's actually about your team. It's about the people that you lead. And your role is actually to create the space where others can succeed and where they can grow and they can achieve their objectives. So look, no matter how experienced we get, the best leaders I know are still those who listen deeply and truly understand the people they lead. They stay humble, and they stay humble enough to adapt when needed, to accept different views and feedback sometimes, which might be challenging. And they also remain curious. They're always, looking for, I think there's a book where it was termed productive paranoia, always, being on the lookout for what could be the art of the possible. And they create environments where innovation and collaboration flourish. So if one takes nothing else from this conversation, remember that leadership is not about being the smartest or the loudest in the room. It's about how you enable others to shine and reach their goals. And also, as you do that, just stay true to you. Bring your best self into the role.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dumo, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and reminding us that knowing yourself is a superpower.
Oh, yes, it is. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nick. I really appreciate it. And looking forward to the journey that lies ahead. I think we are all works in progress and we are all learning and growing together. And let's keep these conversations going. And thank you for the great work that you do in that space, Dr. Nick.
Thank you.